They did it. They stuck the landing with this finale. And I literally watched it last night and had the zoomies. Like, I think I could have done I could have ran a 500 in 2 seconds flat last night. Like, it was so crazy, but so good all at the same time. All at the same time. Insane work. Insane work. But let's just get into it. Hi, I'm Bobby. Welcome to Culture Kitsch. Season 2, Episode 8 of Interview with the Vampire, entitled, "And That's the End of It. There's Nothing Else." This episode, similar to last week's episode, if you remember, I said that I just didn't have a ton of notes because it's one of those episodes that you just have to see to believe. And this is very much so in that vein. Very much so in that vein. I'm going to try my best, but it is an episode that you kind of just you have to just witness it. The episode opens up with a lot of the fallout from episode 7, where Louis is in his rock coffin thing, and he's just basically awaiting death. Like, he has essentially been sentenced to death by starvation. And he's yelling and screaming in agony and in pain, and he is recounting how basically he knew that Claudia was dead. Like, he could feel it. He could feel that Claudia was dead, and in turn, he was also dead. Like, this was a death of his being, in a way. So then Daniel asks Armand, who's also there, of course, what were the consequences of saving Louis? And he says, oh, I was demoted. Basically, he's had to start doing the work that Claudia was doing before she was brutally murdered, and he has to clean up the kills and do the whole rat box thing and everything like that. And in turn, he's constantly interacting with Louise' screaming body, because the rat box and the wet room and everything is right there, next to Nikki, I might add. A little bit of foreshadowing. But Louise being kept there, and so Armand is having to interact with the way in which he failed Louis, because he couldn't prevent it. He couldn't save Claudia, and he couldn't prevent this from happening to Louis, and all this other shit. Whatever. So that's what Armand is doing. So in this time that Louis is in this waiting room for death, essentially, he thinks a lot about his past, and he says, oh, if I would have worn a different suit at the fair play the night I met Lestat, if I would have taken the candy back from the barber when I was 7 years old, basically the butterfly effect. If you do one thing a long time ago, it'll have one small thing will change the course of your life and turn into a really big thing, that whole idea. And he basically comes to terms with this was always going to be his fate. He was always going to meet Lestat. He was always going to get the gift, whether he wanted it or not. He was always going to find Claudia, and he was always going to fail Claudia. There was no other instance, I guess, where this wasn't going to be where Louis ended up. I guess he's thinking in how he got to this place of being in this rock coffin, and he's essentially it was always going to be this, because all of these events in my life were never going to change. And in that, he kind of is I was always going to choose Lestat. I was always going to make that decision to choose Lestat, and in turn get the dark gift and all the things that came with it. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. A little bit interesting. But anyways, so we go on, and Armand explains that he swapped Louis' coffin out with another, a dummy coffin that had a different body in it, and basically gets Louis out. And he feeds him, he puts some blood on the rocks, and the rocks drain the blood through so Louis can feed. And Louis was I was dead, but my rage was not. And so Louis up. And he's rageful. He's vengeful. The Théâtre des Vampires will be the Théâtre des No More. He's on the prowl. And he's also my rage was alive, and so was my madness, because Louis at this point is a raving lunatic. Like he is kind of aimlessly walking through Paris. He's like, I can't go back to the apartment. I can't do this. I can't do that. So he stumbles into this abandoned cemetery. He kills this farmer guy. He stumbles into this abandoned cemetery, and this is where he's plotting and planning and scheming on how he's going to kill the Theatre des Vampires. And he's like drawing on the floor, and he's just like going through everyone's names and like how he's gonna do it and how they wronged him and how they wronged Claudia. And at one point I think he sees like a dead cat or a mouse or something, and he's just like rambling, and then in the middle of it he just says meow.
Sam Harnswan close. Meow. Sam Harnswan close.
I was like, oh, he's lost it. Oh, he's lost it. He's just like meow, and then he just goes back to like scribbling and doing all this other stuff. It was just a small little moment of comedy in a storm of insanity that was Louis at that point. It was crazy funny. Oh my gosh. So while he's doing that, so while he's scribbling on the floors and purring and meowing and stuff, Armand is trying to call him telepathically, and he's just like, you know, Louis, whatever you do, like, get out of Paris, don't do this, you know, whatever you're gonna do, don't do this, you know, don't worry about me. And Louis like, I'm not worried about you, don't even worry about that, because I was never worried about you in this moment. And Louis just basically asked him like, are you, you know, like, did you save me? And then Armand immediately goes into, I couldn't prevent it, I couldn't save her. And Louis not like, he's bulldozing past those points. He's just like, did you save me? If so, then I will grant you the ability to live, and basically just don't be at the theater tomorrow night at curfew. Like, this is my one single act of mercy for you. And he kind of just like hangs up on him, not in the mood. And this scene was especially crazy to me in hindsight, because when Louis asked Armand, you know, did you save me? And Armand is like, yeah, knowing what we know now, incorrect. And if Louis just knew that Armand was lying this entire time, Armand would have been up in that theater getting fried up too. Like, crazy turn of events, crazy domino effect in that way. So basically Daniel gets to the point where he's just like, so like, what was the plan? And Louis is like, I was going to die, and I was going to take as many of them with me as I possibly could. So he walks into that theater, like the basement where they're all sleeping, looking absolutely marvelous, absolutely scrumptious, incredibly sexy. And he's a man on revenge. He's like vampire John Wick right now. Like, he walks into that basement and is just chugging, just putting gasoline everywhere, on the coffins, on the dressing room, like boudoirs, like all of it, like the desks, everything that's in there. He's lighting that up. And he basically says something to the effect of like, when vampires go to sleep, like, they are deep sleepers, like they don't really hear anything outside of their coffin. So basically it was a full-on sneak attack that he could do, like anything, like until they woke up, until they were, you know, thrust out of slumber, he could do whatever he wanted to do, and it really didn't matter. Like, no one was going to stop him. So he gets to what I assume to be like Claudia's little dressing room station, and they wrote on the mirror of her station, "Tweedly deedly dead." And when Louise sees that, he fries that place up. Yeah. The way that I was screaming, I was like, yes, yeah. Like, I was like, absolutely, absolutely, yes, get him up, fry him up. The screams were like the best song I've ever heard in my life. They all deserved it. They all were active participants in Claudia's death. So now they get to die. It's only fair. It's only fair. In doing that, he realizes that some of them escaped. And 4 of them ended up escaping. And he was just like, I plan for contingencies. So basically, he knew that 2 of them would probably escape via motorcycle, which were Celeste and Estelle. And they're like, who could have done this? Oh, it was the London Coven. They knew that we took over the Coven from Armand, and they like sense weakness or something like that. And then one of them was just like, oh, could have been Egley as as revenge for you stealing Santiago. And it wouldn't make sense because Egley died too. But it doesn't really matter because when they're on a bridge, one of them, I can't remember who, one of them says like, arson is an act of passion. Like in her, she was convinced that it was Egley, and she was like, arson is an act of passion. And when she says that, boom, they blow up because Louis put like wrapped gas, I think, around like a certain line on the motorcycle, and he basically ignited it from afar with his mind on fire, and so they blew up. I cheered again. It's Santiago left, and Santiago is in the tunnels, I guess, and he is like trying to communicate with Celeste and Estelle, basically trying to regroup and be like, hey, what's going on? Because the 3 of them in the coven were kind of doing a lot of the mastermind work behind the trial play thing, and he is trying to communicate with them, and they blew up. But Louis is like, hey, Francis. Oh, and it has Santiago shook because he's like, whoa, who's calling me by my human name? And Louis is just like, hey, Pookie, I'm alive, but you're not going to be for very long. And Santiago is trying to like rile Louis up. Like he's saying all these just abhorrent things about Claudia, saying that they used her ashes for eyeshadow. And then he also, just says like a really disgusting remark about her, saying that he used her like wet ashes to pleasure himself. It was everything. Like whether he did it or not, he was doing it to rile Louis up by desecrating Claudia. But Louis is very much so, when they go low, I go to hell. And Louis starts spilling Francis starts spilling his tea, basically being like, like, you had a small dick and a girl from your little farm town went around and told the whole town. Like, your business was out in the open. And then also, you were an understudy for 1 week at this play, and you were incredibly nervous and bad. And then 2, you pissed on yourself when your maker was about to turn you. Louis. Keep going. So in that like whole thing, Louis trying to conjure Santiago to him. He just keeps saying like, come to me, come to me, come to me. And eventually they see each other, and Santiago like pops out of the little manhole covering, and Louis is right there with a little scepter and just beheads Santiago, and then says to his disembodied head, say that shit about Claudia to my face. And then he kicks his head. And I was like, oh, that was good. That was a good sequence because it was set to like the jazzy score that we got in episode 2, which was really like one of my favorite scores of the entire season. It felt like a superhero kind of, with like a noir feel and like a mystery feel. And like it was one of my favorite sequences in the entirety of the show. Like it was brilliant. So after that, Louis questions Armand about basically everything. He's like, so when did you start lying to me? And Armand lies again and basically says like, after Madeline was turned, they told me that they were changing the script and they threw it at my feet, and basically just saying like, oh, my hands were just so tied, there was nothing I could do, blah 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 blah. And after that, Louis like, where's Lestat? And Armand's like, you can never kill him. And Louis like, that's literally not what I asked. Where's Lestat? And so Armand takes Louis to go to where Lestat is. But before he does that, Louis is just like, you'll never make this up to me. Like, this situation, Claudia being dead, will never, like, you will atone for the rest of your life and it will never be enough for me. Just know that. And Armand, I guess, wanted to test that theory. So they go to what is revealed to be Magnus's lair, and that's where Lestat is. And I think we find Lestat, and he's like reciting the words that Magnus said to him when he was turned. Like, he's kind of in a bad way in this lair. Like, he says that he came back here to understand his roots, and you can tell that he's, you know, after, like, post the trial, not doing super great. So that's why he's there. So Louis shows up, and he's basically like, he's really upset with Lestat because Louis is under the impression that Lestat was involved in the trial that eventually led to the death of their daughter. And Louis is confused and upset and pissed as to why Lestat would want to do that. And Louis, remember, at this point, is under the assumption that Armand saved him. He doesn't know that Lestat actually was the one who saved him, which is revealed later into the episode. I don't know why I got worried for spoilers. You guys know how this goes. But whatever. Just know that Louis is operating with a different set of information. So basically, when they get there, Louis is like very much so rightfully pissed, and he's like taking little jabs at Lestat. So he's just like, oh, like, is this where your maker chained you up? And Lestat knows how to spar with Louis. Like, when they get like this, they banter in a way that like only they kind of understand. But Louis is just like, you know, why would you do this? Why would you cross the ocean to rehearse a play that was meant to kill our daughter? Like, why would you do that? Like, why? What was the reason? And he's doing all of that, and he's basically just saying, like, you know, Lestat, like, I've come to kill you. And he uses his fire gift, Louis does. And Lestat is basically just like, you're literally not strong enough to do that, so good luck. He's like, I have the blood of Magnus in me. And then Armand says, like, Magnus burned. And so Armand uses his fire gift, and then Lestat rebuts to Armand with the line that made me scream out loud at 3 a.m. Lestat then says,
I have the blood of Akasha in me.
I yelled. Oh my God, I yelled and I screamed. An Akasha mention? I've been praying for days like this. Oh, maybe I've been praying for days like this. I've been praying for days like this. Are you kidding me? Just casually mentions, I have the blood of Akasha in me. I screamed. This may not be important to y'all, but let me tell you something. She's very important to me. Oh my gosh, that was such a big deal. Also, quick little pause. Someone did ask me, like, who was everyone on my Vamps poster. So I'm just going to tell you, like, super duper fast. This is Pauline Pert in The Satanic Rites of Dracula. This is Aaliyah, obviously, in Queen of the Damned, playing Akasha. This is Grace Jones in Vamp. This is, sorry, I don't know who I was saying sorry to. I'm the only one here. This is Vanetta McGee in Blackula. This is Teresa Graves in Vampira. And this is Angela Bassett in Vampires in Brooklyn. That's everyone on the board. So someone asked me about it, and I just wanted to address it. That little throwaway line, a major deal to me. And what's more important is that Akasha's coming. She's coming. The queen is on her way. Yay! So after that, when basically Lestat tells Armand like, oh, I have the blood of Akasha in me, and he's like gestures to Louis, and he's just like, he doesn't know who that is yet. Louis then figures out, okay, I can't kill Lestat like in body, but I can kill something that is way more important to him than his physical form, and that is his ego. I can kill his ego. So Louis then goes to Armand and is just like, here's your death, Lestat. And then he kisses Armand and he says like, we're gonna be together forever and ever. We're in love. Like, we're gonna spend the rest of eternity together. So eat rocks, basically. And he just like, Lestat just lets him go. And in the talkback part of the episode, it was really interesting because Sam Reed talks about how like Lestat is kind of confused at the energy that Louis is giving him, because Lestat doesn't know that Louis doesn't know that Lestat was the one who saved him. Louis is under the impression given to him by Armand that Armand was the one who saved him. So Lestat is like, what is this energy that you're giving to me at this current juncture? I thought we were cool because I like saved you or whatever, but you're being kind of like mean to me. Don't really get that. And the whole time Lestat could have said like, oh, I was the one who saved you, but he didn't. He just let him go. Louis and Armand being together, I guess Lestat thought that that would be best for Louis. Maybe he thought that they didn't need to be together at that point. I don't really know what Lestat's motivations were in that moment. But in turn, he doesn't tell Louis that he was the one who actually saved him. And then they go on and they cut back to present day, and Louis and Armand are like, oh, so we sailed from port to port. We landed in New York and settled there for a little while. And then we made our way over to San Francisco. And, you know, now we're here and everything's been so lovely. And that's it. That's the end of it. And then they say the name of the episode. And that's the end of the story. There's nothing else. So then Daniel's just like, okay, in session, but I've got some follow-up questiones. And this whole time Daniel has been coordinating something with Raglan James, and he's basically like, you have some information that I need in this moment, like kind of right now, like I need something. And basically in that Rashid then comes into the room and it's just like, oh, Mr. Malloy, the newspaper you requested. So that was the information that he needed from the Talamasca. And then Daniel starts asking some follow-up questions, and he's basically starting to poke holes, and he's just like, it's interesting. You said at a certain point in New Orleans that, you know, Lestat telepathically talked to you about you scaring a tractor salesman, but I thought that makers couldn't talk to their fledglings after they were turned. And then Louis like, I don't know, maybe he just like whispered it to me. And Daniel's like, yeah, interesting. Another thing, so y'all said that Sam was guarding Armand, but also he was carting you off and putting you in the rock coffin. Was he like two places at once? Like, how does that work? And Louis like, I don't know. And then one of the last questions that Daniel asks is like, so in New Orleans, when Lestat invited all of those soldiers and army men to your house, and he was able to kind of like mind fuck all of them, like how many people was it? And Louise like, I don't know. And then Daniel was like, you should just ballpark it for me. And Louise like, probably like, 30 or more. Like it was a lot of people. And then once Louis answers that question, Daniel's like, yeah, I just thought it was interesting because it seems like there was more than one person who could have saved you at the trial. It was more than one person who had the ability to control a lot of different people and perhaps make them say one word that starts with a B and ends with an anishment that would have saved your life. Wonder who that was. Louis? Yeah. Very, very interesting. So then Daniel drops the GD bomb.
You were supposed to die with Claudia. He didn't save you. Lestat did. He just took credit for it when the opportunity presented itself. And you wasted everyone who could have told you differently. 77 years based on a seismic lie.
Armand said in the couple scenes back where Louis is like questioning him, Louis asks like, did you rehearse the play with Lestat? And Armand's like, no, I didn't. I was sleeping while they would rehearse. So basically he's saying he was lying to Louis and basically saying like, oh, anything that happened in the play, I really wasn't, I had no idea. Like I was just as like captive and held prisoner as you guys were. Like I had nothing to do with it. Turns out Armand not only knew every single beat and word and line of that play, he also knew because he directed it. He made certain points. It was his idea for Santiago to give Claudia's diary to the audience to have them feel the evidence. Armand was at the center of it all. He was at the center of it all. And now when I'm thinking about it, in episode 7, when Lestat begins to like go kind of like off script a little bit, Daniel asks like, oh, well, how do you know he went off script? And Armand says, oh, well, Sam, who was guarding me, was cursing under his breath. No, Armand knew that Lestat was going off script because Armand knew the script. He gave notes on the script. He directed the play with said script. Armand was at the center of it all. Louis was supposed to die with Claudia. Armand didn't save Louis. Lestat saved Louis. Lestat was the one who stopped the audience and made them all say banishment. And so they cut to a scene where Armand is giving notes and everything, and he's directing Lestat in the play. And he is just, and I think at a certain point, Lestat's like, oh, how are you going to keep Claudia quiet? You know, like I know my daughter, she's just not going to not talk. And so then Armand's just like, the judges will just fog her mind. Like, that's just what they'll do. And then Lestat rebuts, and it's just like, you have no idea of Claudia's strength. And I was like, all right, father of the year, I guess, 2 episodes in a row. Wow, Lestat, really our papa of the year. It only took you 50 years, I guess. But basically the whole kit and caboodle is that Armand knew the whole thing. He knew the whole thing. He set it up, and he was ready, willing, and able to have Louis die with Claudia. Now, me personally, my personal theory on this is that I think Armand wanted Claudia to die more than he wanted Louis to die. Like, I think Louis was collateral of Claudia dying, not the other way around. Like, I don't know if it was an intentional thing to kill for Armand to have Louis killed more than it was to have Claudia, who got in the way of Armand and Louis, to be killed, and in turn to have Louis killed in the process. Methinks that Armand wanted Claudia dead more than anything else and was willing to have Louis go down with the ship. So basically, how Daniel was able to receive that information from the Talamasca is because we get another reveal. Sam was their inside guy. Sam was a part of the Talamasca. That's how he was able to escape. And now apparently he's a DJ. I don't really know how that works, but he was their vampire on the inside. And he was the one who was able to give them Armand's script. Because remember, Sam was the playwright. He was the guy who always kept the scripts and everything. So of course he would get Armand's script and Armand would think nothing of it. And also Sam was the most loyal to Armand. And so that's how he was able to get all of that information. And Armand got caught. And Louis was very, very, very upset about that. And Louis leaves the room, and then Armand goes and chases him. And he's just like, Louis, you're past this now. The pain of it is ebbed. Like, this is over. And it's done. Like, you shouldn't think about this. And so Louis then gets really rageful, and he like pushes Armand into the concrete wall. A lot of people were criticizing this part because they were saying like, oh, this is Claudia getting sidelined yet again. Because Louis wasn't upset that Claudia was dead. Louis was upset that it wasn't Armand that was the one to save him. And I don't necessarily know that that was true. Like, he thought Lestat was the one who had a fuller hand in Claudia's death and was willing to drop him for the most part for like 70 years or so, in lieu of Armand, who, because Armand did his memory manipulation stuff, he made it seem like he really couldn't do anything to prevent it. Like, he was just as much a victim and a captive as Louis, Madeline, and Claudia were. So like, he's been thinking all these years that Armand would have done something to save Claudia if he could, but he didn't. He only was able to save Louis. And I think Louis gets upset because he knows not only did Armand do nothing to like not save Louis and was willing to let him die, but I think Louis was more upset because he could have done something to save Claudia and lied all these years about it. And he didn't do anything. Like, Lestat, again, I am happy that Lestat saved Louis. Me personally, I know he was weak. He probably had a little bit more juice to save Claudia. I'm just saying. I'm sorry. Feels like he might have had a little bit more gas in the tank to do it twice. The case in point is that I think Louis was upset because Armand lied all these years, both about his role in saving Louis, but also his role in killing Claudia. I think that's what set him off more than who saved him. You know, like, that's personally, I feel like you could have done something to save Claudia and you didn't of it all is much more of a bigger betrayal to Louis than who saved him at that point. I will be the first one to say, when the show has, done Claudia wrong in so many ways, and ultimately that was, always going to be her fate. But I think in this case, this is not exactly that. It is Claudia being the collateral of all of these relationship strifes and whatnot, but in this current moment, I don't necessarily think this was her being just expendable once again on Louis' part. Like, I think he was legitimately rageful because someone could have done something to save Claudia and they didn't. And they lied about it all these years. And he stayed with him. Because in the scene where he kills Santiago and Santiago asks, like, oh, are you with your companion? Louis was ready to drop Armand at that second, and it had done it already, because he was under the impression that Armand had something to do with Claudia's death. He said, like, oh, we broke up. Like, it's hard to hold hands with someone who killed my daughter and my fledgling. Like, Louis had already made it up in his mind that Armand had something to do with Claudia's death. He is the reason why she is dead. And so therefore he was not going to fuck with him anymore. And it wasn't until Armand lied and manipulated him and did everything under the sun to make him think otherwise that Louis had a change of heart and of mind. But then when he found out the truth, he immediately dropped him again. Like, I think Claudia was at the center of all of this. Like, it really wasn't anything that was like, it felt like he was like, yeah, I'm done. You lied to me and you did nothing to save my sister daughter. We're done. And so Louis, in a fit of rage, like, pushes Armand against the concrete wall, and that makes all the books and stuff fall down, and it cracks the like the wall and everything like that. And he basically tells Armand, like, you will not touch Daniel. You will not harm him. I'm leaving. And when I come back, your stuff better be gone and you better be gone. Okay? I'm out of here. Like, this is done. And so then he goes to Daniel and he gives him a handshake and he just says, thank you. I think it was a clarity handshake, a thank you for clearing up my mind and giving me some memories and some clarity back Thank you. And then he sets Daniel's computer on fire. He sets it on fire, which is fair. Very, very fair. So after this, Louis goes back to New Orleans. And let me tell you something. I was so happy. I was so happy. He is back in New Orleans, had his accent back. Oh my God, he had his accent back. And I could have cried. I could have cried. I'm getting my man back. My Nola baby, Louis Dupont-du-Lac. I'm getting him back in this moment. This was a big deal for me. And it was funny, like, Louis coming into town when Hurricane Odetta, I think, is rolling through New Orleans. And so he's like, going to his old haunts. He takes a tour, and the tour stops at his old house, and they talk about basically the events of episode 7 of season 1. Where they throw the big party, and like everyone who went in never came out, and all these different things. And like, it's funny to see kind of how the story of his life kind of it got shaped and shifted, and it was just one big game of telephone over all of these decades. And he's able to kind of laugh and see how different things sounded and how different their recounts of the events were. But while he's doing that, he's also wearing like his little baseball cap, like he's wearing his little Saints snapback, and he's got his little like bomber jacket on. Like, he just looked so, seeing him in contemporary clothes that aren't just like these drab black dreary dregs that like Armand had him dressed in every day. It was just really nice to see. His casual wear, impeccable. And it only got better as the episode went along. But in doing the little tour, he sees a guy who's like capturing rats, and he does it really fast, so he knows that he's a vampire. And he follows the guy to this like broken down mansion. And who was inside that mansion but one Lestat de Lioncourt? Someone said, and I fell out, someone on Twitter said he was like Patrick Swayze from Challengers, because why is he cosplaying as poor? He has money. He's cosplaying as poor and hasn't showered and is only like vegetarian now because he only eats rats and doesn't eat humans. And Lestat is like playing a wooden keyboard. It's not a keyboard, it's just a plank of wood that he's carved to look like a piano. And he's got his little iPad and speakers. He's dressed in a robe, and it's just so funny. So Lestat has made another one. He's made another vampire. Someone said they need to put him on birth control. They need to put him on birth control, but he made another one. And so he kicks his fledgling out. And this scene, it's kind of hard to recap it because there's so many layers and it's so much complexity. And it's just one of those scenes where you just really have to bear witness to it, because Louis comes to Lestat and he's basically thanking him for the gift. He didn't know it was a gift. He thought it was a curse. Talking about, being turned into a vampire. And he's like, I finally want to embrace life now. Like, I want to live and learn to live, honestly. And Lestat then brings up the call that he got from Armand in episode 5, and Lestat is just like, did you hurt yourself? And Louis was just like, I was in a dark place and all I could do was think about her. And then they have this really beautiful moment of commiseration, I guess, of it really is just two grieving parents talking about the death of their daughter, Claudia. Like, they're talking about how they can't stop thinking about her, the ways in which they feel that they failed her. Like, there's so much that they're discussing in this moment that it really is just like, you see how both of them are just, they've been just overwhelmed with grief for all of these years. And as someone who has had to defend Claudia all season, when people would throw her aside and neglect her, she is the center and the core of this dynamic. They are two people who, love each other, maybe didn't know how to love each other, but had a daughter who died. And that creates a bond between them that they don't share with anyone else. And it's because of her. And Anne Rice wrote the character of Claudia in memory of her daughter. So this was a display of parental grief. And one of the moments that was really compelling throughout this whole scene, which was incredibly compelling, was Lestat being like, she looked at me right before she fully, died. And she looked to me like a child looking for their father. And Lestat can even finish the sentence because he's just like, and I never was. And I think the assumption was going to be like, he was going to say, and I never was a father to her. And so that's the guilt. They both are filled with the guilt of what they didn't do for her. Louis is guilty because he wanted her to be turned in the first place, knowing she would suffer, knowing she would live this hard life. And Lestat never was really a parent to her. They both loved her so deeply and so honestly and so truly, but they never showed it to her. And so they will forever be like eaten up with the guilt of, did my child know that I love them? And that is tough. That is a tough situation for these two to be in, for all of the things that they went through in their relationship and all of the things that were really difficult about their dynamic. Claudia could have been a really positive thing, but both of them, from whatever perspective they were coming from, for whatever reason it was, they both knew that they failed her, and they both knew that they can never do anything about it, and that will always ruminate with them. They'll never be able to let that go. And I really applaud the show for doing that. I appreciate that they didn't just kill off Claudia and have the aftermath of her death not mean anything. Like, this means something. This is a really big deal to them. And I think it will carry for the seasons to come, God willing, that the show will get. Like, Louis and Lestat will always have to be haunted by how they treated their daughter. Again, doesn't mean that they didn't love her, but it's like I've said in the show every single week, where these are monsters who are wanting to love but have no idea how to, and it becomes cumbersome and difficult, and they don't know how to maneuver it at all. And that's how you get all of this hurt and anguish and strife between these people who want to love but quite literally are monsters. And so this was just a really human moment of the show, where you have Louis and Lestat basically being two parents grieving together. And in that also, we get them reconciling, I think, for their relationship. They're not back together at this point. Louis says, I'm companion for myself right now. And I could have done a backflip because I was like, oh, this is what I've been wanting. Louis' single era is loading. Like, I was like, oh, Louis is not with any of these terrible people. At this current juncture, I could have screamed. But then they embrace as the hurricane is whirling around them. And that was the Lestat and Louis reunion that we got. And I thought it was one of the most compelling scenes in the season. Also, during that scene, what I thought was really funny was Lestat is clutching this, again, plank of wood that he has carved to look like a piano, and he's just like, I'm going on tour. He says, is this the way that I yelled? Because if you don't know, this past week the show got renewed for season 3. Woohoo! And season 3 will follow Lestat going on tour with a band. He's starting a band. And they're basically adapting the events of the vampire Lestat. That's what season 3 of the show will be. So him planting the seeds of, I'm starting a band and I'm going to go on tour, was quite literally so hilarious. Before you get into this really just emotionally just devastating sequence with him and Louis talking about Claudia, but him just being like, yeah, I'm going on tour. So we leave New Orleans and we cut to Atlanta, which is where I'm from and where I live currently. We got to Atlanta where Daniel is on the book tour. The book is now out, Interview with the Vampire by Daniel Malloy. And it's out, and he's talking to this newscaster and really giving him shit and everything. And then he calls Louis, but he doesn't call Louis via a phone. He calls Louis via his mind, because guess what? Peepaw got turned into a vampire. Daniel is now a 60, 70 something year old vampire. He's a vampire now, and I just think that that is so hilarious. Not in a bad way. It's a little funny. But Daniel's a vampire now, and he was turned by Armand, and he's kind of, I think, looking for Armand. Like, he's, really referring to him. He's just like, oh, the motherfucker, like, and then Louis says, I'm sorry that you were burdened in spite. Basically, you were turned out of spite by Armand. And so they have like a really quick conversation about that. And the talk back, Eric Bogosian basically says that Daniel has now turned into this annoying little brother of Louis now, because Daniel always deeply cared about Louis. He always cared about him wanting to find who he was and be honest and true to himself, and would be on his ass when he needed to be. But he was rooting for Louis always. And so now in their vampire life, he cares deeply about Louis and, wants to check up on him and, know that he's okay and do all this stuff. But Louis is just like, oh, like, you go and do your thing. Daniel keeps, saying like, have you read the book? Have you read the book? And Louis is like, no, I'm not. I haven't read it. And basically a lot of what was in the book was edited by the Telemasca, which makes Louis upset. And so Louis is just like, they should have never published the book and all these things. And basically that kind of, it just leaves it there. Like, he's just like, I'm never going to read this book. And Daniel's like, oh, we should do another book, no editors this time. Like, as you want to tell it is the way that we're going to tell it. And so that drops the little breadcrumbs for where we're going for next season. Things wrap up with Louis, who's in his little like thinking room. He's back in Dubai now, and Armand has gotten the boot ski, so he's out of the house. And Louis is in his big thinking room where the bookshelf that he couldn't access used to be. And now in that room, he has a portrait of Paul, and he has Claudia's yellow dress, and he is sitting and he's meditating. And before I get into what he does at the very last shots of the show, having Paul and Claudia in this space was such a big deal. And at the beginning of the episode, when Louis is talking about, like, basically I wanted to die, like I had nothing else to live for, they show flashes of Paul and of Claudia. Paul and Claudia were the two people, more than these relationships that he's been in, were the two people that he cared, I think, the most about. And it's funny because both of them and their deaths mark new beginnings for Louis. So Paul dies and Louis dies with him. His soul, a part of his soul goes with Paul, and he dies as a human and then becomes a vampire. And when Claudia dies, I think a piece of him, his adherence to humanity and just really this holding on, that dies with Claudia as well. A piece of him dies with Claudia. But in both times, he's reborn as something new. And so now that Claudia is gone, I think Louis is now reborn as a being who wants to embrace life. Louis has always been around and surrounded by death and rebirth, and he's always tried to hold on to this very firm idea of humanity and what it means to be a human and what it means to live as a human. But now, embracing, eternity ahead of you, Louis wants to live and live truthfully and live honestly. And he holds and carries Paul and Claudia with him, and they remind him to live. They were two people who saw him and really understood who he was and cared very deeply about him without condition. And it is their memory that allows him to live, and to live honestly and live truthfully and want to live. Eternity's not going anywhere. And I think Louis finally gets that now. I think he's haunted by their deaths, but he's also comforted by their presence in a way. And their portraits being up in his apartment just speak volumes, I think. It's just rebirth and new beginnings for Louis Dupont du Lac from here on out. So he's in the room and he starts to meditate, and he says, basically, he makes a call out to all the vampires of the world who are now reading this book, and he can hear them. And they're like, this is heresy. We need to kill him and everything like that. Like, now he's got the entire vampiric world on his ass. Like, they are coming for Louis. And Louis, basically in this last shot, it's just like, bring it on. I will tell you exactly where I am. I will tell you exactly how to get to me. And I will dare you to fuck with me in the process. And the last thing he says is, I own the night, which is a very fun contrast to where we began with season 2, episode 1, where we have the ancient world vampire saying, we own nothing. And the season ends with Louis saying, I own the night. And that is the end of season 2 of Interview with the Vampire. I thought this finale was perfecto. I thought it was so good, so brilliantly done. It was everything that I wanted it to be as someone who loves Louis, as someone who deeply cares about Claudia. I think it was a really great eulogy for her, and I feel like we'll see her again in season 3, haunting the narrative, like how Lestat was haunting the narrative this season. I want Claudia to haunt the narrative next season. I deserve that. I earned it. I've pounded the pavement. Give it to me now, Roland Jones. Respectfully, I would like Dream Claudia for season 3, please. The mention of Akasha gave me everything I needed and more. It's one line to y'all, but it was a book to me. A whole book. A book entitled The Queen of the Damned that we will be getting to sooner rather than later. And I feel like in season 3, if they're going to go back through Lestat's history, they have to talk about when he drinks Akasha's blood. Because if he already had Akasha's blood in him in Paris in the 40s, he's already awoken Akasha. So it's just a matter of time before she fully, gets going. And so I feel like we're going to get that at the end of season 3. Fingers crossed. I think it was, to me, the best episode of season 2 for sure, and definitely in my top 3 of best episodes between both seasons. It was just so good, so well done, a perfect cap to this really great season. Overall with the season, I think it was a phenomenal piece of television. I was thinking about it. I think season 1 I like still a little bit better, but just by a hair. I think season 1 was just kind of a better collective piece. I think it was a little bit better paced and better laid out. But season 2 was also really great. I know that some of the kind of like technical pieces of season 2, as far as things like pacing and, things like that, were dramatically affected by the writer's strike and actor strike that halted production last year. Rightfully so. And so because that kind of, they had a little bit of time where things, like they kind of entered crunch mode, I would imagine, at a certain point. The pacing was just a little bit less tight than it was in season 1. But obviously there was a very real and valid reason as to why that might have happened. So it wasn't anything that was too glaring. It was a bit slow in the first 6 seasons, and it felt like we were kind of moving at breakneck speed for the last 2 episodes, or for the first 6 episodes, and then the last 2 episodes, it was kind of, like boom, 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 boom. But in a perfect world, there would have been a little bit of a better, more even pacing between the episodes, especially the kind of early to middle episodes for me personally, which I think it would have just made it that much more perfect. But again, that's me being nitpicky. That's just a little technical thing. It was still brilliant. It was still a brilliant piece of television, and it makes me really excited for season 3. I'm not going to lie to you. I think going from episode 7 and in the week between episode 7 and episode 8, getting the season 3 renewal, I was ecstatic, obviously, but I was a little bit nervous because I'm like, like a whole season kind of centered in Lestat, who we've gotten this kind of less than savory viewpoint of for a very long time. How is this going to work? And I think this episode did a really great job of assuaging some of my fears of that. You know, like Lestat is not perfect by any means, nor am I like now like, ooh, Lestat like stan or anything like that. But I think this episode did a good job of showing his vulnerabilities, showing that he is greatly affected and impacted by Claudia's death, and he will continue to be greatly impacted and affected by Claudia's death, and seeking to atone for it, and also seeking to atone for, you know, the things that happen in his relationship with Louis. So it makes him a little bit more sympathetic to me, the audience, or part of the audience. And I thought it was a really great kind of bridge for where we were, ending this book, ending this, you know, piece of the journey, going into the next one. But that's the season finale, y'all. Like we made it to the end. We started this journey with the first episode of season 2, and now we're here, and it's just been so much fun. I want to thank everyone for, you know, tuning in every single week to hear me ramble about this show. Whether you liked what I said or whether you didn't like what I said, I still appreciate you being here with me, and I hope you'll continue to be here with me while we do some other stuff. Like, you know, we'll do some vampire stuff every once in a while, but we're branching out. We're trying a bunch of new things. I want to watch a bunch of other stuff. I want to react to a bunch of other stuff. I have a ton of video essays that I got, you know, coming down the pipeline. So I hope that you will stick around with me. Now that the show has ended, I still think I can be fun in a non-vampire context. So I hope that you will stick around for that. But as always, be sure to like and subscribe and do all that fun stuff. Let me know what you thought about this episode, and also let me know what you want to see from me going forward now that the season of Interview with the Vampire has ended. As always, I'm Bobby. This is Culture Kitsch. I don't have an outro yet, but I will see you later this week. Perhaps Friday.